He found her chained to a dead man in the heart of the Apache desert. The sun was not a fire, it was a hammer, a white-hot anvil beating the life from the cracked, bleached earth. Marshal Silas Kent rode low in the saddle, his hat pulled down, his bandana pulled up. The world had been reduced to the grit between his teeth and the smell of his own sweat. He smelled the wagon before he saw it. It was the smell of corruption. The thick, sweet rot of death under a relentless sun. His horse, Old Job, snorted, tossing his head, not liking it. Silas calmed him with a hand on the neck, his eyes scanning the shimmering salt flat. There, a dark shape, wavering in the heat haze. A broken wagon, a skeleton of wood, picked clean by the wind, and two smaller shapes beside it. He drew his rifle from the scabbard. He did not draw his pistol. The pistol was for speed. The rifle was for answers. He approached slow, circling wide. This was not a place for mercy. This was a place for endings. The first shape was a man, bloated, blackened, his clothes stiff with dried fluid. He'd been shot twice in the back, a prospector by the look of his ruined gear. Flies rose in a thick, angry cloud as Silas got closer. The second shape was alive. Silas dismounted. The ground crunched under his boots. She was shackled by the wrist to the dead man's ankle. She was a map of human suffering, sun-baked skin, burned to blistering, cracked open in places that wept. Her lips were split to bleeding. Her hair was a matted tangle of black, filled with sand. She was dressed in rags that might have once been buckskin. She lay on her side, her breath a shallow, rasping sound, too weak even to fight the flies that crawled on her face. She didn't look up as his shadow fell over her. She had no hope left to look up with. Silas moved slow. He kept his rifle in the crook of his arm. This could be a trap. The desert was full of them. He knelt, his eyes on the dead man, then on her. He pulled his canteen. The water sloshed. It was the loudest sound in the world. Her head snapped up at the sound. It was not a human movement. It was primal, desperate, the instinct of a creature that needed water to live one more second. Her eyes met his. They were not European. They were dark, deep, almond-shaped, and held the reflection of a burning, empty sky. In those eyes he saw not just thirst. He saw fever. He saw madness. And beneath that he saw an ember of fury that refused to die. He knelt closer, uncorked the canteen. The smell of the water hit her, and a low keen escaped her throat. He brought the metal rim to her lips. She drank like a wolf. She lunged at it, choking, greedy, her hands too weak to grab, her teeth scraping the metal. Water spilled down her chin, turning the dust on her skin to mud. He pulled the canteen back gently. She snarled, a weak, hopeless sound. Easy. His voice was rust. He hadn't used it since dawn. There's more easy. He let her have another sip, and another. He knew that too much too fast would kill her. He looked at the shackle. It was heavy iron, new. He looked at the dead man. He looked at the tracks. 3 riders. They hadn't been careful. Their tracks were deep, arrogant. They rode heavy horses, shod. One of the men smoked expensive cigarillos. A stub was ground into the salt. They had ridden hard, heading east. Laughing as they went, Silas imagined. They had shot the man, chained the woman to his corpse, and left her for the sun. It was not a crime of passion. It was not a robbery. The dead man's pockets were turned out, but a heavy gold nugget lay half buried beside his hand, untouched. This was a message. Or worse, it was sport. It didn't matter. The result was the same. Silas stood. He went to his saddlebag and took out the heavy steel file. When he returned, the woman was watching him. Her eyes were clear for a moment. She knew what the file was for. He knelt. He didn't speak. He positioned the file against the iron ring. The sound of steel on steel was the only sound for miles. Scree, scree. It was brutal work. The shackle was thick. The heat was a physical weight, pressing him down. Sweat poured from him, dripping onto the hot sand. The woman watched, silent. Every rasp of the file sent a vibration through the chain, jarring the dead man, jarring her. He tried to be gentle, to hold the shackles steady, but her wrist was raw, rubbed down to bleeding meat beneath the iron. She flinched with every pass of the file, but she did not cry out. It took 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. The metal grew hot from the friction. Finally, with a sharp crack, the shackle snapped open. She collapsed onto the sand, her freed arm useless, her body seized by a violent, rattling tremble. The sudden release was too much. Silas did not speak. He put the file away. He sheathed his rifle. He lifted her. She weighed nothing. She was a bundle of sticks and dried skin. He placed her on his horse, Old Job. Seating her in front of the saddle, she slumped forward, her head resting on the horse's neck. He mounted up behind her, his left arm coming around to hold her against his chest. She was like a broken doll, her head lolling. He looked east, where the tracks disappeared into the shimmering white-hot void. He looked at the stub of the cigarillo. He knew that brand. He knew the arrogance of those tracks. Elias Thorne. Silas's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. This wasn't just a marshal's duty anymore. This was a reckoning. He looked east, at the heat-rippled horizon. I will get you through this. It was an oath spoken to the desert itself. And then he vowed he would get them. He turned Job north, away from the tracks, towards the distant promise of the Dragoon Mountains. They rode. The world was a furnace. The woman, she did not give her name and he did not ask, drifted in and out of a fevered sleep. She would murmur, words in a language he didn't understand, the words punctuated by gasps of pain. Then she would go limp, her breath so shallow he would have to stop, put his finger under her nose just to feel the faint, hot puff of life. His own thirst was a tightening band around his throat. He had one canteen. It was for her. He would not drink. Not yet. His focus narrowed to 3 things: the woman's breathing, the path of the sun, and the memory of Elias Thorne. Thorne, a man who dealt in flesh and misery, a man who saw the frontier not as a home but as a place with no rules. A slaver, a murderer, a ghost. Silas had been chasing for 2 years, ever since Thorne had burned out a settlement in the New Mexico territory, leaving nothing but ashes and crosses. Silas had been too late then. He had sworn he would not be too late again. Now Thorne had made it personal. This act, this chaining a living soul to a dead one, was a signature. It was a statement of ultimate contempt. Thorne believed the desert gave him the right to be a monster. Silas knew the desert was only a mirror. It showed you what you already were. Night fell. The desert cold did not creep in. It fell like a guillotine. It fell like a guillotine. The temperature dropping 30 degrees in an hour. The woman began to shake, her body's fever fighting the frigid air. He found a shallow wash, a small break from the wind, where the ghosts of ancient water had left a pile of dry mesquite. He slid from the saddle, lifted her down. She cried out, a thin, sharp sound, as her stiff limbs moved. He propped her against his saddle, her back to the wind, and covered her with his bedroll. He built a fire, a small, efficient fire. It crackled, a tiny, defiant spark in the ocean of cold darkness. He sat opposite her. He gave her more water. Then he took a piece of jerky from his bag. It was as hard as boot leather. He poured a few precious drops of water onto it. Softening it, he held it out. She looked at it. She looked at him. She ate, slowly, like a person. Not a wolf. Her eyes cleared. The fever was still there, but the madness receded. For the first time, she truly saw him. His face was weathered, carved from sun-baked rock. His eyes were the color of a faded denim shirt, and they held no pity. Pity was useless here. They held only resolve. She swallowed. She looked at her own wrist, the raw, bloody circle where the shackle had been. She finally spoke. Her voice was sand and gravel, broken by disuse. They will come back. Silas stared into the fire, feeding it another stick. The flames danced in his cold eyes. I'm counting on it. They are 3, she whispered. He, the one with the black beard, Thorne, he said. He would let the desert have me. Silas checked the load in his Winchester rifle. He laid it beside him, its wooden stock warm from the fire. He checked the action on his Colt revolver. He laid it on his other side. He looked at her, his face half lit, half shadow. They were 3. Now they are just dead men who don't know it yet. She held his gaze. The fear was still there, a deep, cold thing, but something else was growing beside it. A hard, cold ember. The desert hadn't killed her. It had burned everything away but the will to survive. She was, he realized, just like him. He let her sleep. He sat awake, rifle across his knees, and watched the stars. He was a long way from the law. He was in a place where justice was what a man carried in his own hands, and his hands were steady. The next day was a slow hell. They rode. He gave her the rest of the water, drank the last few drops himself. The canteen was empty. Now they were both on the clock. The woman was stronger. She sat upright, holding the saddle horn. She did not speak, but she watched. She watched the horizon. She watched the rocks. She watched their back trail. She had the eyes of a hawk. Twice, she put a hand on his arm, a simple, light touch. The first time she pointed, vultures, circling, miles to the south, back where they had come from. The second time, she just tensed. Silas reined in job. He listened. He heard nothing but the wind. What? He whispered. Horses, she said. Far, but coming. He slid off the horse, pressed his ear to the ground. She was right. The faint, rhythmic thunder of shod horses, riding fast. 3 of them. Thorne. He must have realized his message was gone, or perhaps his cruelty was so profound he had to return to witness his work. Silas looked around. They were in open country, low scrub, flat rock. To the north was the Canyon Pass. It was the only way to the water at Fort Sumner without crossing 20 miles of open murderous plain. The pass was tight. It was a perfect ambush. Silas knew it, and he knew that Thorne knew it. We go to the canyon, he said. He mounted up. He pushed Job into a steady, ground-eating lope. They reached the mouth of the pass. An hour later, the air was still. The rocks baked in the afternoon sun. It felt wrong. They are here, the woman whispered. Her voice was steady. I know, Silas said. He slid from the horse, pulled his rifle. Get down. Stay with the horse. Get behind those rocks. He pointed to a jumble of red sandstone. She did as she was told, moving with a stiff, painful grace. She was a survivor. Silas felt the eyes on him before he saw them, a prickle on his neck. He reined in Job, standing beside the horse for cover. Marshal, the voice echoed from the ridge above, oily and confident. Elias Thorne. He sat on his black horse, flanked by his 2 men. They were fanned out against the bright morning sky, 3 dark shapes of doom. You got something that belongs to me, Kent. I paid good silver for that squaw. Silas didn't move. His hand rested on the stock of his rifle. He kept his body between Thorne and the woman's position. She ain't property, Thorne. She's a person, and you're under arrest for the murder of the man back at the wagon. Thorne threw his head back and laughed, a thick, ugly sound that echoed off the rocks. Arrest? You in what army? Lawman. Look at you, half-cooked, 1 horse, and used-up baggage. You're a long way from home. One of Thorne's men unhooked his rifle, a younger man with a nervous twitch. Just leave the girl, Marshal. Right away. We'll even let you keep your horse. Silas saw the 3rd man, the smart one, already trying to inch his horse to the side to get a better angle. Last chance, Thorne, Silas said. his voice flat and cold, carrying in the still air. "Come down slow, or I'm bringing you down hard." The world exploded. Thorne barked an order. "Kill him." The flanker fired first. Spang! The bullet screamed off the rock near Silas's head, stinging his cheek with stone fragments. The second man opened fire. Thwack! A bullet slammed into Silas's canteen, punching a hole through both sides. The last of his water, his precious water, drained onto the sand. Silas didn't flinch. He slid low, pulling Job's head down, shoving the horse toward the woman's rocks. He dropped behind a low shelf of rock, bullets chewing the stone above his head, kicking up dust. He raised his Winchester. He did not aim randomly. He waited, he breathed. The flanker, was the threat. The man broke cover, urging his horse forward, trying to get a clear line of sight on the woman. He raised his rifle. Silas fired. One shot. The rifle bucked. The flanker clutched his chest, a look of profound surprise on his face. He toppled from his horse and lay still. "Damn you, Kent!" Thorne roared, his voice no longer laughing. He and the third man unleashed a volley, pinning Silas down. Bullets ricocheted, whining like angry hornets. The third man, the nervous one, got spooked. He saw Silas, saw his friend fall. He thought Silas was trapped. He stood up from his cover, trying to get a better shot. "I got him, boss. It was a mistake." Silas fired again. A clean shot. The second man crumpled over his rock, his rifle clattering down. Silence. A terrible, ringing silence. It was just Thorne, tense, waiting. The air smelled of gunpowder and hot metal. "You shouldn't have done that, Marshal," Thorne yelled, his voice strained, full of rage. "Two good men, for a squaw. She ain't worth this." Silas slowly, deliberately, reloaded the 2 spent cartridges. He kept his eyes on the pile of boulders where Thorne was hiding. "The talking's done, Thorne." Thorne knew it was over. He knew Silas would not leave. He knew he could not escape. He burst from cover. He didn't run for his horse. He ran straight at Silas, firing his revolver, screaming a wordless roar of pure hatred. He was no longer a man. He was a rabid animal. Silas stepped out from his own cover. He stood tall. He didn't rush. He raised the Winchester. He took a breath. He aimed. The revolver barked. Thwip. Silas felt a line of fire sear his arm. He squeezed the trigger. The Winchester bucked against his shoulder. Thorne stopped. He looked down at his chest. He looked up at Silas. His mouth opened. He spun, hit the dust, and did not move again. The silence that returned was absolute, heavy. The desert waited. The wind blew dust over the dead. Silas Kent stood there for a long moment, the rifle hot in his hands. His arm was bleeding, but it was just a graze. He reloaded the rifle. One more cartridge. Always reload. He walked to the woman. She was huddled behind the dead oak, her eyes wide, her knuckles white. She had watched it all. He stood over her, a tall, grim shadow against the bright sun. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't offer empty words of comfort. He just took his ruined, empty canteen, unhooked it, and let it fall to the dust. Then he walked to Thorne's horse. He took the full canteen from the dead man's saddle. He walked back to her. He uncorked it. He held it out. She looked at the canteen. She looked at the dead men. She looked at him, at the blood on his arm. Then, slowly, she reached out and took the canteen. She drank. This time she drank slow. She drank deep. When she was finished, she handed it back. He helped her onto his horse. He mounted up behind her, his body aching. He turned Job not towards Fort Sumner, not towards the white man's fort, the other cage. He turned the horse west, towards the distant, sacred peaks of the Chiricahua Mountains. It wasn't his job to arrest. Not today. It was his job to deliver. The desert had demanded a price for her life, and Silas Kent had paid it in lead.